We'll begin a little full disclosure here that some of my family are in the cattle business, and we had a very low opinion of sheep. And working on a ranch in my youth, I heard many stories about the evils of sheep. So I just wanted you all to know that as we begin with a story about sheep. And the 15th chapter of Luke's Gospel has three lost and found stories: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. We're saving that one for next week, I think. Looking for a place to put this down so I can gesticulate. And you've probably seen the pictures of the Good Shepherd, and it shows Jesus in a clean white robe carrying a clean white lamb on his shoulders. And we have a song about that. But that's probably not the way it is. A longtime friend of mine, gone to his reward now, was a bivocational Episcopal clergyman. His other vocation was as a veterinarian. And he used to say, "I know sheep." For us to be chosen by Jesus as an example of sheep is not a compliment. Sheep have, I learned this growing up, many faults, but one of the most important ones is they cannot get along on their own. Sheep need a shepherd. And even when they have a shepherd, they do lots of dumb things. Many years ago, Mary and I were living in a community with a group of people, and for some strange reason, we acquired a lamb. That was very stupid. We knew nothing about caring for lambs. And as our vet friend said, lambs are born to die. They're just looking for a way to get in trouble. And this lamb didn't last with us very long. But we learned a little bit about the habits of sheep. Number one, sheep belong in flocks. Now, you've heard of the Lone Ranger, and you've heard of the Lone Eagle, and you've heard of the Lone Wolf, but have you ever heard of a lone sheep? A lone sheep is a dead sheep. Now, what does that have to say to us Christians? Because we too belong together. Now, you run into people all the time who say, "Well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And every day I go out in the back of the house and sit on my yoga mat and meditate." But where is your community? Because we sheep belong together in the flock. So when that one sheep went missing and the shepherd went off to find it, what were the other sheep doing? Well, they were complaining. Our shepherd has gone off, left us, and went to take care of that one stupid sheep who's probably fallen in a hole somewhere. Because we Christians are not always kind to our fellows. And if someone goes missing, what do? Whatever happened to old Charlie, I wonder? Used to be in church every Sunday. Wonder where he went. And if somebody goes out looking for him, especially the pastor, he's wasting his time on old Charlie. He could be more productive dealing with us. because we're not lost. That's a little arrogant for us Christians to say. Remember in the Boy Scout days, occasionally someone would get lost. And I remember once one of our scouts in our troop was missing all day. And somebody finally found him, said, "I wasn't lost, the camp was lost." Well, we tend to think of the lost as somebody else. And we have at home a ecumenical prayer breakfast thing. And someone is always praying for the lost of Lake City. And you're thinking, maybe that's us. Maybe we're the ones who are somehow gone astray. Terrible thought. Because we're the Christians. We're sitting together around the table, eating and munching up the good grass and complaining. But in both of these stories, the lost sheep and the lost coin, there's a very important word. Anybody want to guess what it is? Rejoice. The shepherd and the woman both call friends together and they say, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the one who was lost." And we kind of understand the woman and the lost coin because that's 10% of all that she has. That stupid sheep is only 1% of the flock. And we would say, well, let's not waste time on that. But very important in the shepherding of the Middle East in the first century, that you deliver a whole flock. If you sell that flock to somebody, there better be 100 sheep, because you can bet that the buyer is going to count them. Got to have them all. And Jesus uses this figure with people who understand that. It's not okay for one of the sheep to be missing. And you can think of all kinds of mechanical incidents, and one missing bolt can cause a whole lot of trouble. One missing piece can bring down a whole airliner. And if you remember, I think it was Flight 232 that crashed in Sioux City, there was one tiny little fault in a piece in one engine. And you could think, what's the big deal? There's plenty of engines. Except when this one came apart, it did serious damage to the whole airplane. We tend to think, we who are found, that we've got everything we need. We don't need this stupid sheep who's wandered off, but we do. And most of us can think of an example of someone who we didn't think was useful. And we had a fella in our congregation when I was a pastor down in New Mexico, and we couldn't figure out what Mac was for. But everyone in any congregation is important. And Mac was kind of peculiar. Got his wires crossed in Vietnam a little bit. So he would come in to the parish hall, which we never locked, and play the piano at 3 in the morning. And wasn't a very good piano player, but who cares? And a police officer across the street says, that's the best security you can have. You never know when he's going to show up. And anybody sort of casing the joint we'd say, yeah, this guy could appear at any time. But then we got the peculiar idea that we could rebuild a disassembled pipe organ. And I won't tell you all about that. It was much more complicated than we expected. But part of the job was to attach a whole lot of wires from the pipe works to the console. And Max said, I could do that. I used to wire missile silos in the service. That's a very frightening thought if you knew this guy. But anyway, he said, I can do that. And he would sit there for days with a soldering iron and put this all together. So you never know. But you got to have all the sheep. We need the whole flock. So one last story and we'll move on. But a Jesuit friend of ours who we've done a number of retreats with over the years was speaking to a group of nuns. Not unusual for a Jesuit. I guess it's a group. I don't think you call it a flock. But this group was listening. He was talking, of all things, about the story of the sheep and the goat. You all know that one. There are 6 corporal acts of mercy. Visit the sick and, all those. And so it goes like this. Have any of you always done these acts of mercy? Always taken in a stranger? Always fed the hungry? Never drove by a jail without stopping to see the prisoners? Anybody done all 6? Always? Well, don't see any hands. Have any of you never done any of those things? Still no hands. And when my friend, I steal everything from somebody, so when he was doing this talk to the nuns, one of them said, I think I understand. We're all good goats. And we will not ever be perfect sheep. But at least we can be better goats. Because Jesus has taught us what we have to do. He says, if you do these things, you have done it for me. Now, illustration of how good I am at this, we had an incident in Lake City many years ago when our sheriff was shot by a couple drifters coming through. There have only been 6 sheriffs killed in the line of duty in all of Colorado, 2 of them in our county. So all sorts of weird things are going on, and I was the fire marshal at the time, and we deputized all sorts of people to go out and look for the bad guys. And the Methodist chaplain to the police force in Gunnison had come down to help out. And I told him, well, you can stay in our guest house tonight. But then I heard he'd gone back to Gunnison, and that was true. He'd gone back to pick up some medication, and he'd come back, and all of us are a little on edge. That's my excuse. So we've finally gone to bed, and in the wee hours, there is a knock on our door. So I go to the door, which has glass in it, and in my wonderful, welcoming way, I say, keep your hands where I can see it. Talk about welcoming the stranger. Most of us don't do all of these things very well, but at least we can recognize the lostness in ourselves. And when we stray, You can take this to the bank. Jesus will come and look for us. He's watching all the time when we go off the path, and will come and find us. But the important part of these two stories, I think, is the rejoice part. And are we a joyful people? Christians are pretty good at complaining. Remember how that story started out? Scribes and Pharisees, the religious people like us. Whenever you see the word Pharisee, might be worth translating into religious people like me. But anyway, they are complaining. What are they complaining about? Jesus is associating with tax collectors and sinners, with the dirty sheep. But we're lucky because he associates with us. So may we be a joyful people. May we rejoice every time one of us is found. Every time our Lord goes out and finds us. Because the lost are not just out there. Often the lost are right here. Now, we don't know each other's hearts really, but we do know that we can be better goats. So let us pray together.